Hey, welcome back. ProGeologist here. And today we're going to take a look at how we can set up locator services within ArcGIS Pro. Something that probably should be fairly intuitive. Unfortunately, it isn't always the easiest thing to do. So let's dive into it and see how we can get those locator services working and in tip-top shape. As already outlined, we're going to go through and we're going to take a look at how to set up the location tool in ArcGIS Pro. And this tool is something that it's not as intuitive to get up and running at first, but once you know how to do it, it's actually pretty straightforward. And so what we actually need to start with is we need to start by, of course, having our project open. And we're going to end up here on the map tab. Under the map tab, as we've outlined in the intro video, we will see that there's the inquiry group. Under that inquiry group is this little button for locate. And we're going to use this to actually locate something within a feature class, within a shapefile, within a layer. And in essence, anything that's kind of been geocoded and is ready for us to search for within the map. We're going to start and we're going to use a different layer. A layer in this case that we're going to use is actually the NAD 83, geographic NAD 83 oil and gas wells that are part of the California Department of Conservation. This is actually going to be linked in the video, but this is from the California Open Data Portal. It's a file known as the WellStar oil and gas wells, as already mentioned. And so I'll have that linked here in the video and down below. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and start by adding these data. I've got a file right here, all wells, NAD 83. It's a shape file, so it's stagnant. We can talk a little bit more about the source data if needed, but I'm going to go ahead and add this. And you'll note we pan all the way out. There's the United States. I love this, how they have a data error. Don't know who's managing these data, but suddenly we end up off the coast of Nigeria. But when we look at this, we have the bulk majority of our data existing right here in California, as it should be. I'm going to pan back to California, look at all those wells that show up. And now keep in mind that my map right now is set to geographic NAD 83. That's lat long, kind of loosely put out there, right? And in this case, the file I brought in was also NAD 83. But even if this shapefile was not NAD 83, just as a reminder, ArcGIS Pro does a wonderful job about making coordinate transformations, coordinate referencing system transformations and projections on the fly. Again, as I've mentioned before, the big caveat is you don't want to be making measurements between well locations, as with this example, or measurements of area with that same projection kind of being taken place on the fly. There'll be another video that talks a little bit about that. But in the meantime, let's get back to figuring out how we can locate things. So if I come up here, I'm going to toggle locate, and you'll notice the locate pane pops out to the side. I'm going to drag that over a little bit so it's a little easier to see. So we've got our map with our wells here. And let's say that I wanted to find a particular location, a particular well that I want to deal with. I've actually got one right here that I'm going to drop in. It's something I want to search for. This is an API or a key unit that I'm going to search upon, a key indicator, if you will, or key identifier. And I'm just going to plug it in and I'm going to hit enter and it's going to go. Now there's a problem. Immediately you can tell this has nothing to do with those wells from the California Open Data Portal. This has nothing to do with those oil and gas wells. As a matter of fact, when I look at it, I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil. If I pan out a little bit on my map, way out, we'll end up seeing that, yeah, I definitely ended up not anywhere near California. As a matter of fact, I'm not even on the same continent anymore. So what went wrong? What's the problem? Well, let's start by going back to our fixed location. So if I pan back a little bit more, go back. Here we are back in California, looking at all those wells. This is the well identifier I want. But this is one of the big caveats here, is that when I set up the locate services, I've got several options. Right here, I have this button that's got like little sliders on it. When I hit that button, and I especially target that upside down caret, notice how there is an XY provider that is checked on. There's also an ArcGIS World Coding Service checked on. Both of these are essentially looking at what Esri has put together for geocoding addresses. So what has gone on here is I plugged in that API for that well in the state of California, and lo and behold, ArcPro thought that that was a geocoded address. And so it took the best and closest address that it could, and it plotted that and zoomed to that on the map. That's not what we want. And so for any instance by which we bring in a shapefile, a layer, a feature class that we want to be able to search, we actually need to set up search criteria. So there are a couple things I can do. I can go to the hamburger here. First of all, I'm going to toggle on detailed view. I like that. It gives me a lot more details than just this single line view. Okay, so I toggle that on first and foremost. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my upside down caret. Next to the sliders, notice how I have this button for provider settings. I'm going to open that up. A new window pops up, and you'll notice there are the XY provider and the ArcGIS World Geocoding Services. Now, I can leave these toggled on. For this instance, I'm actually going to toggle them off. Why? Well, because I'm kind of confining myself in this exercise to the state of California, and I really don't need to figure out where a location is on the globe. I just need to figure out amongst my well data set where the well is located. So I've toggled those off, but I'm not done. The next thing you need to note is there are a couple other buttons here. You'll notice that I've got a configure for locate. I've also got an add locator to project. I can move things up and down in priority. I can edit some locating or provider settings that are already set within the locator, and I can remove things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to configure for locate. So I toggle that button, and you'll notice here are my layers and or tables that are available in my project in this particular map. See how my all wells nat 83, that is there. Make sure that's highlighted. This is going to set this up as a location provider within these settings. I say, okay. And what it does, I'm going to step back real quick. What it does is it shows here, we see that that gets loaded into ArcPro. Now, if I want to edit that, I can come up here to the edit configuration, but as you saw just a moment ago, it automatically brings me into the configuration, and it is taking in all of the attribute table alias names. So in this instance, whoever created this for CalGEM, for the open data portal for the state of California, they have well API, and you'll notice that I've got a drop down. We've got type, we've got statuses, we've got names, we've got all sorts of stuff that we can mess around with in here that we can set as a provider setting. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at API. I love this. It's already saying equals, but I can choose two options. I can choose nothing, meaning, hey, don't key on this field, this data field in the attribute table. Or I can say, no, here is equals, meaning this is a specific value that I know exactly what it is. I know how it behaves. I know what it looks like. I know what I should be able to do with this specific provider, if you will, and the material therein. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to say, hey, I want equals as opposed to contains. If I chose contains, all of the regular criteria that you could actually set for searching and doing something like a Google search or even a SQL query would kick into play here. It also means I'm going to end up having a lot more options to choose from when I do a generic search. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details on the contains, but yes, this means wildcards like the star or the asterisk come into play. Yes, dollar signs can come into play. Spaces can come into play. Even the number of digits in the search can come into play. We're keeping it very simplified this time. We are going to say equals, and that's on the API. Now, I'm going to do one other thing. I want to come down here, and I'm going to choose well ID. This is their fancy term, their being state of California's fancy term for well name. And I'm also going to set that to equals. Now, a word of caution. We will probably get a warning with this data set. Anything that has more than 80,000 features, which this definitely has more than 80,000 features. I mean, look at that map. I will get a warning because what's going to happen next is after I have set the API and I have set my other fields that I want to search, use as criteria for searching, I hit this little back looking button. What this does is it actually applies the settings. It will ask me, if I want to index these fields. Well, if I'm using a specific identifier, I'm going to hit yes here as I talk through this, it will go through and it will try to identify those. It will try to catalog and index every one of those so it knows what to search on. Now, you note I've gotten a warning, right? The length is greater than 80. What does that mean? It means one of these attributes somewhere has more than 80 characters. But additionally, as I mentioned before, not only is there an 80 character limit in each of these data fields, but there's also a limit of 80,000 features. Now, that may be fixed in an up and coming release of ArcGIS Pro. But for now, just note 80 and 80,000, those are the big caveats. So what's going to happen? Well, you notice what field, it's the op well ID, meaning it's struggling, it being ArcGIS Pro is struggling to identify and index all of the well names. That's okay. We can ignore this, but note that if I search based on well name and not a unique identifier like an API, I'm going to end up having issues. But let's go back. That is now applied. As mentioned before, my XY provider, I've chosen to turn off for this. And my ArcGIS World Geocoding service, I have also chosen to turn off for this. Now, there's another video where if we want to set geocoding that will be provided at a later time, as already mentioned, but let's focus on these wells. So now I'm going to go back out to locate, and I am once again going to paste my API number in here, my unique identifier. I hit enter this time, and hopefully we don't end up in Sao Paulo, Brazil. But you notice on my map there, it was flashing. Now, I had mentioned before that I like to see the detailed view using the little hamburger, these ellipses that are here, detailed view. Why? Because it provides me all the information that I have set up in the locator. It's even given me, in this case, the corporation or the entity that runs and operates this particular well. If I right click on it after it's been found, I can flash that on the map. You can see that right here. It was flashing a little green dot. Do that one more time. Okay, right click and I say flash and it flashes it right there on the map. The other thing I can do is I can zoom to or I can pan to. Let's go ahead and pan to that. Oh, looks like I'm centered already. Let's go ahead and zoom to that and it will zoom me in a little bit more. So I can zoom in again and I can zoom in again. And, you know, I can go ahead and flash that on the screen one more time to see where that is located. And there's my well, right? If I want to get more details, I can actually click show details. That will pop up. It tries to pop up on my other screen, but here it is, just like if you were to use the little selector button and select it directly from the map. And so here are all the details pertinent to that particular well. So again, I can flash it on the screen. There it is located right there, in this case, near Hanford, California. So what we've done real quick is we've gone through, we've looked at the attributes associated with the locator tool. We found out about the various tools and providers and the provider settings that are associated with this, including Esri's own XY provider and the ArcGIS World Geocoding service. Again, for this exercise, we toggled those off and we used one of our existing layers within the map to turn around and set provider settings that allow us to search on a unique identifier. Okay, that's a recap. Now, what I want to do is I want to step away from this. Let's say I just have a well name. Now, spoiler alert, this is the same well unique identifier. And keep in mind, our well name column in that attribute table did not get fully populated and indexed. So when I paste this in here and I hit enter, I may get several other options, but look at that. It pops it right back up. This was one of the instances where it did get populated. So we can see that. And that was all because of my provider settings that I had set. By coming in here, go into provider settings, and then I can edit those. In this case, I chose the API equals, open well ID equals, and I avoided using contains because I'm not trying to get too complex with this search. I've got specific names or specific identifier, unique identifier, such as an API that I can use for this. So there you have it in a nutshell, how you can set up the location services within ArcGIS Pro to search for wells based on name or even any other entity, whether it be a facility or it be a particular location within a shapefile, feature class, or layer of some sort. But there you have it, plain and simple, getting the location and the locator provider settings set up in ArcGIS Pro to let you search using key entities. More to come on this. Hopefully you learned a lot, and we'll catch you in the next video.